Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Praveen.
Sir, shall we start?
Good evening.
Ranjit sir, namaskar. Good evening.
So, good evening, all. Welcome to the fourth session on the subject Comparative Public Law and Systems of Governance. Today, we have with us Ranjit Chandran sir, DGM Legal of Canara Bank, Bangalore. And today's session is on the topic Ombudsman, Sweden, UK, and India. Before moving on to the session, I would like to call upon Shruti Sudhakaran, LLM student from Government Law College, Trivandrum, for the review of the previous class on the topic Separation of powers in India, UK, USA, and France. Over to you, Shruti.
Okay. Good evening, all. Okay, we can start the class review. It's on the topic separation of powers in India, UK, USA, and France. Slide visible ആണോ എല്ലാവർക്കും?
അതെ.
We can start with the separation of powers. The term separation of powers or Trias Politica was initiated by Charles de Montesquieu in his book Esprit des Lois, that's the Spirit of Laws, published in 1785. And this idea was introduced with a view to avoid the arbitrariness of the government. And Montesquieu found that if this power is concentrated in a single person's hand or a group of people, then it results in a tyrannical form of government. So he suggested that there should be clear-cut division of power between these three organs, namely the legislative.
Sound കേൾക്കുന്നില്ല ശ്രുതി. സൗണ്ട് കേൾക്കുന്നില്ല.
സർ ഇപ്പൊ കേൾക്കാവോ?
ഇപ്പോഴും ക്ലാരിറ്റി കുറവാണ്. അത് ചിലപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു ഇയർഫോൺ ഉപയോഗിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇയർഫോൺ മാറ്റി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അറിയാൻ പറ്റും.
സാർ ഇപ്പൊ ഓഡിബിൾ ആണോ?
ഇപ്പൊ കുറച്ചും കൂടെ ക്ലാരിറ്റി ഉണ്ട്.
ഓക്കെ സാർ. Then the significance of separation of powers. Whenever a large power is given in the hand of any administering authority, there are higher chances of maladministration, corruption, and misuse of this power. So this doctrine helps to prevent the abuse of power, and it protects the individual from arbitrary rule. So this is the significance of separation of powers. Next is the history of separation of powers. Separation of power is a model for the governance of both democratic and federative state, which was first developed in ancient Greece and came into widespread use by the Roman Republic, part of its codified constitution. And in 16th and 17th century, French philosopher John Bodin and British politician Locke expressed their views about the theory of this separation of powers. So its origin is traceable to Plato and Aristotle. It was Aristotle who was for the first time classified these functions of the government into three categories. That is, first one is deliberative, second is magisterial, and judicial. Then Montesquieu formulated this doctrine of separation of powers, and it was a scientific and systematic formulation. This is all about the history of separation of powers. And next is the Wade and Phillips theory of separation of powers. This theory implies certain points that the same person should not form part of more than one of the three organs of the government. And the second one is one organ of the government should not interfere with any other organ of the government. And the third one is one organ of the government should not exercise the functions assigned to any other organ. So this theory has had different application in USA, England, and India. This is the Wade and Phillips theory of separation of powers. And we are moving on to separation of powers in USA. The principle of separation of powers finds a good mention in the Constitution of USA, while the federal Constitution of the US doesn't expressly provides for the separation of powers. In American Constitution, we find that legislative, executive, and judicial powers are there. They are separate entities, and Section 1 of Article 1 states that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of United States. And Section 1 of Article 2 states that the executive powers shall be vested in a President of the USA. And the third one is Section 1 of Article 3 The judicial power of US shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So these are the separation of powers in USA. And the characteristics of US separation of power is that they have the presidential form of government. The form of government characterized as presidential is based on the theory of separation between the executive and legislature, and the president being both the head of the state as well as its chief executive appoints and dismisses other executive officers and thereby controls the policies and actions of the government departments. And the person in charge of various departments designated as the secretaries of the state holds the office at his pleasure, and the ultimate decision rests with the president. And the separation is maintained between these legislative and executive organs, which whereby neither the president nor any member of the executive is a member of the Congress. And this system of government is fundamentally different from the Indian parliamentary system. This is the characteristics of USA separation of power. And there are certain principles, that is the principle of checks and balances, which is an exception to the doctrine of separation of power. The principle of checks and balances is which means that the system provides each branch of government with individual powers to check the other branches and prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. That is, for example, the Congress has the power to create laws, and President has the power to veto them, and the Supreme Court may declare the laws unconstitutional. So the Congress consists of two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and can override the presidential veto with 2/3 vote in both houses. And this checks and balance system also provide the branches with some power to appoint or remove members from the other branches. And Congress can impeach and convict the president for high crimes like treason and bribery. And the House of Representatives has the power to impeach the president, and Senate has the power to convict and remove the president from the office. And in addition to this, the Supreme Court candidates are appointed by the president and are confirmed by the Senate, and the judges can be removed from office by impeachment in the House of Representatives and its conviction in the Senate. So this is the principle of checks and balance. We can from this we can know that it is an exception to doctrine of separation of powers. And next is separation of powers in France. Before moving on to this, the government of France is which consists of a semi-presidential system or dual executive system. The president exists a prime minister and cabinet, and later being responsible to legislature of the state. And it differs from the presidential system in that the cabinet, although named by the president, is responsible to the legislature. And semi-presidential system is determined by the French Constitution of the Fifth French Republic, and the nation declares itself to be an indivisible, secular, democratic, and social republic. And the doctrine of separation of power in France. Even though France is credited with giving origin to this doctrine, it recognizes this doctrine in its constitution in a flexible manner. Article 1 and 2 separates the legislature from the executive. Eminent feature of this doctrine is reflected in its dual court system, wherein one kind of court deals with all the civil matters and another kind deals with the administrative matters. And French administration is also consists of the three organs: legislative, executive, and judiciary. And legislature makes laws, executive implement these laws like us. And but the executive, by exercising veto to prevent a particular law from being passed, keeps a checks on the legislature. And judiciary too has the power to determine the constitutionality of the laws passed by the legislature. And legislative branch also has the power to remove a president or judge if they are doing the duties of their job right. And this is the doctrine of separation of power in France. Next, the doctrine of separation of power in UK. In UK, the absence of a written constitution, there is no formal separation of these powers, and hence no act of parliament may be held to be unconstitutional if any power is conferred in breach of the doctrine. And the executive consists of crown and the government, including the prime minister, cabinet of ministers, and also the civil service. It formulates and executes the government policies, and the government is accountable to the parliament, which has the ultimate power to dismiss a government and force a general election in which the new government will be elected. And the government is mainly elected from the members of the parliament who sit in either House of Common or House of Lords. That are the two houses. And the legislative power in UK, it is held by the Parliament, which is composed of the monarch, House of Lords, and House of Commons. And monarch has only nominal powers and mainly has to listen to the advice of the Prime Minister. And House of Commons consists of elected members of Parliament. House of Lords consists of unelected hereditary peers and life peers appointed by the Crown, and archbishops and bishops of the Church of England. But House of Commons is superior to House of Lords in the case of lawmaking. And main function of the Parliament is to create or amend law, scrutinize the government, and enable the government to make financial decisions. Next, the judicial power of the UK. That is main function of the judiciary is to hear upon and resolve the matters of law, and one essential function is to develop the law through their judgments. And judiciary consists of judges in courts as well as those who hold the judicial office in and tribunals. Our senior judicial appointments are made by the Crown, and their independence is protected in the Act of Settlement 1700, according to which senior judges can only be dismissed by address to the Crown from both houses of the Parliament. And next is the Lord Chancellor. It is the most peculiar feature of UK, and he was a part of all three branches of the government. Prior to the Constitutional Reform Act 2005, he acted as the head of the judiciary, was a member of cabinet, and presided over the House of Lords as its speaker. But in future, the Lord Chancellor will be can be a part of either of the houses. And Constitutional Reform Act 2005 led the British government towards having a clearer division among these powers. And next one is doctrine of separation of powers in India. There are certain relevant provisions in Constitution which are dealing with the separation of powers that are Article 50, which state shall take steps to separate the judiciary from the executive, and this is to ensure the independence of the judiciary. Next one is Article 122 and 212. This states about the validity of proceedings in Parliament, and the legislature cannot be called into question in any court. This ensures the separation of legislature from the judiciary. And Article 53 and 154 respectively provides that the executive power of the union and the state shall be vested with the president and the governor, and they enjoy immunity from civil and criminal liability. And Article 361, which states that president or the governor shall not be answerable to any court for the exercise and performance of the powers and duties of the office. These are the relevant provisions of Constitution relating to separation of powers or separation of the organs. Next one is our legislature. Legislature consists of council of ministers elected from the legislature and exercising judicial powers in cases of breach of its privileges, impeachment of the president under Article 61, and removal of judges. Legislative body has the punitive power under Article 105 clause 3. And the executive consists of President of India, Supreme Executive Authority in India, who has lawmaking power in the form of ordinance making power under Article 123, and judicial power under Article 103 clause 1, and the Article 217 clause 3. He has the consulting power to the Supreme Court of India under Article 143, and also the pardoning power under Article 72 of the Constitution. And they also make appointments to the office of Chief Justice of India and other judges. Next one is the judiciary. Article 145 gives the rule-making function of the judiciary, where it performs the role of the executive. And Article 142, Constitution has the power to the apex court for complete justice in the case or matter. So there is a complete shifting from the ordinary powers, and thereby weakening the doctrine in its strict sense. And even the power to amend the Constitution by Parliament is subject to the scrutiny of the court. Court can declare any amendment void if it changes the basic structure of the Constitution. And these are the three organs of our country. And next and finally, there are certain judicial pronouncement on separation of powers. The first one is Ramjevaya Kapoor versus State of Punjab. In this, the Supreme Court held that Indian Constitution hasn't recognized the doctrine in its absolute rigidity, because it is not rigid, but the three branches of the government have been sufficiently differentiated. And next one is Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Nare. In this case, observed that even in the Indian Constitution, there is separation of powers in a broad sense only, and the rigid separation of powers as under American Constitution or Australian Constitution does not apply to India. Next is Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala. It added that the separation of powers is a part of the basic structure of the Constitution. And in IC Golaknath versus State of Punjab, Justice Subrao opined that the constitution brought different constitutional entities into existence, namely the union, the state, and union territories. It created the three organs of the government. They are expected to exercise their respective powers without overstepping their limits. And Bandhu Mukti Morcha versus Union of India. In this case, constitution envisages a broad division of this power of state between three organs, and although this division is not precisely demarcated, and there is a general acknowledgement of its limits. And finally, the Supreme Court Employees Welfare Association versus Union of India. It was held no court can issue a direction to legislature to enact a particular law, neither it can direct an executive authority to enact a law which it has been empowered to do under the delegated legislative authority. This is all about the review. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you so much. Next, I welcome Ranjit sir. So we can start the session, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening to all of you. I will be taking today's session on Ombudsman. Is my presentation visible to all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the concept of Ombudsman that is prevalent in Sweden, UK, and India. That is what we are going to discuss today. You would have heard about Ombudsman. Basically, what is the concept of Ombudsman? That is what we have to know first. Then we will go into the basic what is the system which is prevailing in different states, with different countries. The Ombudsman actually it is a grievance redressal institution. So what do you mean by grievance redressal institution? When there is a grievance of the public, who is going to redress it? The Ombudsman is a mechanism to address that situation. See, this concept of Ombudsman has evolved in different phases over a period of time. Like if you see in different countries, this system was there, though the name was not given. This system of Ombudsman concept or this grievance redressal institutions were there, prevalent. If you see in China, you have, I have written, that is censuring officials. There is a system of censuring officials. Now, the concept of this Ombudsman gains relevance in a democratic system. Like when there is a people is governed through a democratic system, the administration, it is prone to corruption or maladministration or any sort of corruption or any other wrongdoings. So, which will ultimately result in a problem to the public, who is the persons who are being governed. Now, what was the concept? This is because, see, when there is a maladministration or there is a corruption, the people felt the need that there should be a system where I can approach that or I can vent out my feeling. What is my grievance? And somebody should redress to that my grievance. So that was the concept. So basically, earlier, if you see, when there is a what do you call the public administration system which is going on, people will be obviously having a lot of issues. If you see, when we are going for some work, the public officials are not properly attending to your work. They are asking for bribes. They are asking for, they are delaying your work unnecessarily. They are not attending to your work as per the rule or guidelines. So these are all grievances which the public was facing from the system, that is public administration system. So now this thing was earlier also it was prevalent. In China it was there as censuring officials. The officials were censured. Censured means it's a form of punishment. In or ancient Rome, the tribunes of the people, that was a forum which was for doing this purpose. In the case of Mughal emperors, you see I have written here, the bell inside the king's bedroom was kept with a chain, so people can come and ring it, so that the king will come to know that there is some issue. He will be redressing to that. So basic concept is redressal of the grievance. How it is being done, that was varying from place to place and depending on the time period. Like in ancient period, it was a very rustic form. Now it has been revived or refined. So now the basic concept is grievance redressal. That will be in different forms, in different places. It is in different method it is being done. Now, when it became an institutionalized form, where it has come. So there we will get the answer as Sweden. So Sweden was the first country to establish the office of ombudsman. You know, ombudsman, it is derived from the Swedish word ombud, which means a person who acts as a spokesman or representative of another person or persons. So I am telling to somebody that I have faced this issue with the government or with the such type of office. So this person will be acting as a spokesman for me to the government. It is a wing of the government where they are collecting the grievance and they are redressing it. So actually this ombudsman is a public officer. You cannot say that he is a judicial officer. He is a public officer who will be collecting the complaints and he will be investigating into those grievances, public grievances basically. So actually in 1809, that was the date when this ombudsman concept was, or this institution was established in country of Sweden. And it was originally established to provide the parliament with the means of supervising compliance with laws and ordinances by all judges, civil servants and military officers. So you see the judges, civil servants and military officers, how they have carrying out the governance. The judges are doing the law, doing the cases properly, whether they are adjudicating the things. They will not go into whether the adjudication is correct, but they will see whether the judges are doing it properly without taking any bribes or they are doing without delay. So those things will be taken care. Civil servants, like I have told, whether they are addressing to the requirement of the public. Military officers, whether they are breaching their limits, what is their regulations, rules, whether they are doing as per their rules. So these are the concepts which the ombudsman was mainly looking into, and Sweden has established it in 1809. The Swedish parliament is called Riksdag, and the ombudsman was connected to that. So it was actually a connecting link between the public and the parliament. So after 100 years, I think once 1809, Sweden was the first country to establish the office of the ombudsman. After 100 years, that is in 1990, Finland has started it. Then 1954, Denmark, Norway. So you see, mostly the Scandinavian countries. Even now also, if you see, the least corruption is found in the Scandinavian countries, like Finland. I think it is Iceland, Finland. Those places, you have Finland is the least corrupted country in the world, if you see the public administration. So these people were aware of their rights and they were ensuring that there is no corruption, there is no maladministration in the public administration. So that's why this concept has evolved from that area. So Sweden, you see Finland, Denmark, Norway, all are into that side only. Then it came to New Zealand. It's 1962. New Zealand is the first Commonwealth country to have the ombudsman concept. And then Tanzania is the first African country. So I am just talking about the concept, how it came and which places it has started first. So what is the meaning of ombudsman? The meaning of ombudsman, that it is an official, he is an official appointed to investigate individual complaints against maladministration, especially that of the public authority. So public authority is the place where like any issues are happening, or I am facing any grievance, I am facing any issues. So I have to file an application or complaint before the ombudsman, and he will investigate, and then he will come with a grievance redressal. The precise meaning of the term is grievance officer. So grievance officer. The ombudsman is a public officer whose function is to investigate the grievances raised by citizens regarding maladministration of the authority. In other words, if there are gross lapses in the functioning of the public administration, the citizens have power to lodge complaints against the concerned authority. So this is a check mechanism. Like last classes we were talking about the what do you call separation of powers, different types of powers of different systems of governance, like the parliamentary system, the presidential form. Now, see, when the people are electing the government, and the government is not properly functioning, like the arms of the government, the administrative wings, the administrations, different offices which are supposed to serve the people, are not doing their work properly. They are doing things, taking things on their own, in an arbitrary manner, without addressing the requirement of the people. Such a time, this ombudsman will act as a link. Like, see, I will be feeling helpless if I go to the office and if the officer is asking me bribe, or if the officer is delaying me, he has to do it today itself. He is telling, no, I will not do it today. You come after a week. Some such situations, I will be feeling helpless if such an institution is not there. If ombudsman is there, obviously I can go to the ombudsman, file a complaint. So he will be investigating into the issue. He will be looking into the guidelines, like is there a guidelines? Like if you go to a bank, you see the checkbook has to be issued within 4 hours, 2 hours. If there is a guideline as per the RBI, then ombudsman will see whether this timeline has been met or not. If he is not issuing that, obviously there will be a stricture on the bank and penalty will be imposed. So there is a check, there is a control on the public authority against their arbitrariness. They cannot act on their own. It's a check measure. So you see, an ombudsman concept, you establish an ombudsman, but to become an effective ombudsman, or if the ombudsman office has to be effective, what are the things required? See, independence should be there. Obviously, if the administration themselves are putting an ombudsman and like without any powers, if you are doing anything against the administration, he can be removed, or those things are there. The independence will not be there. As such, his power will be curtailed. His wings will be clipped. So what he cannot do beyond the circumference or whatever is the control measures which they have put. So such cases, the ombudsman will not be effective. So independence is one thing which is required. Second is power and authority. Like he should be empowered with all the power to investigate, and he should be able to give impose or enforce his orders. If power and authority is not there, obviously there is no use of his order. Only it will become an advisory, which need not be complied by the authority. Accountability. They should be accountable. Even ombudsman also should be accountable. There should be filing reports, and they should also be taking things as a proper channel. You cannot put another ombudsman to control an ombudsman. So ombudsman also should be accountable. Transparent mechanism should be there, like when the complaint is coming, what are the investigation conducted. So the process should be transparent, and whatever is the order given should be fair and impartial. I will just detail these points when we are looking into the different institutions. First, we will look into the ombudsman in Sweden, which Sweden is the first country where this ombudsman institution was started. So it was called Justitia Ombudsman, that is the JO, Justitia Ombudsman, 1809, this came. In Sweden, the ombudsman system is formed by the following. There is ombudsman for justice, or the parliamentary ombudsman, the chancellor of justice, ombudsman for children, equality ombudsman, and Swedish consumer ombudsman. These ombudsmans, or these people, these institutions were handling different things, like parliamentary ombudsman, administration. Parliament this person was linking between the parliament and the people. Chancellor of justice. there is a mechanism like judicial things. Any issues are there in the judiciary. Obviously, this person will take care. Like that, there is a Swedish consumer ombudsman where the consumer disputes redressals that is being handed over by to this ombudsman. So at that time, Sweden was ruled by the king and therefore the Riksdag of its states. So that was the ruling body. They considered some institution independent of the executive was needed in order to ensure that laws and statutes were observed. As I told, I have made the law, I have made the statutes, but whether this is being enforced by the executive in a proper manner. So executive is there, they are handing, executing the orders. But whether it is properly done or not, this institution was taking care. So parliamentary ombudsman came, and the first ombudsman was appointed in 1810, and the parliamentary ombudsman, is still follows the basic principles that have applied since then. So that is the concept is still continuing in Sweden. The jurisdiction of the ombudsman in Sweden, if you see, a complaint to the ombudsman can be made by anybody who feels that he or she or someone else has been treated wrongly or unjustly by a public authority or an official employed by the civil service or local government. So you see, treatment, wrong treatment, unjust treatment of a public authority. These are the relevant points here. So if I am feeling that I have not been treated properly by a public authority, whomsoever it may be, but he should be a public authority, or if he is an official employed by the civil service or the local government. If such a case, if I am aggrieved, I can approach the ombudsman. There is no requirement that he has to be a Swedish citizen. Even I can go to Sweden, I can file the complaint if I feel that they are not properly catering to my requirement. If I am eligible to that right, I should be getting that right. If I am not getting that right, I can approach the ombudsman. The institution has no jurisdiction over the action of members of the Riksdag, which is the parliament, the government or individual cabinet ministers, the chancellor of justice or members of county or municipal councils. So these are some of the drawbacks. Like this institution has no jurisdiction over the actions of the legislature, that is the members of the Riksdag, government, then individual. So there are some powers which are being curtailed. I was telling you that is one of the requirement of an effective ombudsman is independence. Here I have not been given the power to go into the wrongdoings or any issues regarding the members or the government officials, ministers, but regarding the administrative bodies like offices, the revenue offices. But the elected people, the bodies of the elected people or the executive top level, those people are the chancellor of justice. So such people I cannot interfere. The ombudsman doesn't have the power to interfere or look into those grievances. Newspapers, radio and television broadcast, trade unions, banks, insurance companies, doctors and private practice, lawyers does not come within the ambit of the ombudsman. Why? Because they have a separate supervisory agencies for these areas, such as the Swedish Press Council, Financial Supervisory Authority, the National Board of Health and Welfare, and Swedish Bar Association. So these professional areas, they don't have the, they are not under the ombudsman because as per the statute, there is a separate body. More or less, they are also doing the same work only, like a grievance of the redressing the grievances. An ombudsman is an individual elected by the Riksdag to ensure that courts of law and other agencies, as well as the public officials they employ, comply with the laws and statutes and fulfill their obligations in all other aspects. So I have already covered. So why they are doing? They have to see whether the work has been done properly as per the law, as per the statute, and all obligations have been met. So this is the main concept. Source of authority. What is the statutory backing? The Office of Ombudsman was created by the Sweden Constitution of 1809. It is a constitutional authority in Sweden. Articles 96 to 100 of the Constitution sets out the basic framework of an office in its important function as an independent prosecutor of various officials. Articles 101 to 106 of the Constitution deals with the position of the Ombudsman as a prosecutor in actions of impeachment brought by the Parliament. These are the various provisions. Article 68 of the Parliament Act provides rules for the election of the Ombudsman and resignation procedure. So this is the statutory authority. It's a constitutional body in Sweden. In India, it is not a constitutional body, but in Sweden, it is a constitutional body. See, an ombudsman is elected for a 4-year period and can be re-elected. So 4 years is a term in Sweden. He can be re-elected. Although there is no formal requirement for an ombudsman to be a jurist in practice, but the first, he should have a legal training. That is the basic thing. He need not be a jurist, but he should have the legal training. The ombudsman has the title of Chief Parliamentary Ombudsman and is responsible for administration, deciding, for instance, which areas of responsibility are to be allocated to the ombudsman. So there is a Chief Parliamentary Ombudsman. He will be delegating to the authorities regarding the various areas to the different ombudsmen. However, he cannot intervene in another ombudsman's inquiry or adjudication in any case within his or her ambit. So there is an independence. So Chief Parliamentary Ombudsman is there. There are different ombudsmen under the Chief Parliamentary Ombudsman, and this even though the Chief Parliamentary Ombudsman is allocating the areas where these people have to look into, however, the Chief Ombudsman will not interfere into the inquiry, investigation, or adjudication of the other ombudsman. Each ombudsman has a direct individual responsibility to the Riksdag for his or her actions. The annual reports. That is what I was telling earlier. The chief the requirements for an ombudsman to be effective. Accountability. See here, the ombudsman is required to file the annual reports before the Swedish Parliament. So it will be looked into by the standing committee, and then based on that, they will be taking different initiatives. What is the based on the annual report, they will be seeing whether it was effective, how effective it was. And so there is a check on the ombudsman's control also, ombudsman's action also. Ombudsman's inquiries are based on complaints from the general public. Cases initiated by the ombudsman themselves and on observation made during the course of inspections. So there are 3 categories. One is complaints. I am getting a complaint regarding a particular issue. As an ombudsman, I can initiate an inquiry. I can suo motu also initiate. Like I am going through the road, I am finding some issues, some public administration, some officer is maladministration is there, or I am going to an office and I am finding that issue. So I can suo motu also I can initiate inquiry. Or during the course, I was searching for some other thing and I found out that there is some other issue going on with this public administration system. So I can initiate inquiry on that also. So there are 3 aspects which I can do: general public complaint, then suo motu, and in the course of inquiry, I can also find out other observations. The powers and sanctions of the ombudsman. The parliamentary ombudsman has the right to initiate disciplinary procedures against an official for misdemeanors. So if I find after inquiry that this person is not properly doing, he was delaying the things, he was not handling the things properly, he was asking for bribes, he was taking illegal gratification, he was taking personal benefits, he was taking undue advantage of his position. Such cases, the ombudsman, if he finds that the complaint is correct, then he can initiate the disciplinary procedures against the official. Disciplinary procedure as per the relevant procedures code, what is prevailing in Sweden. But the most frequent outcome is, however, a critical advisory comment from an ombudsman or some form of recommendation. See, that is the one drawback. Ombudsman is finding out there is an issue. So he has the power to initiate disciplinary procedures. However, mostly what is happening is he is only giving a critical advisory comment. He will tell that I have inquired into these things and this is what I find. There is some issue. He will tell that this system has to be changed. It is recommended that if you continue this process, there is high chance that there is future grievances will be there, or there will be a form of recommendation. This person may be removed, he may be transferred, some sort of recommendation. So he is not directly acting, but he is giving a recommendation. And the most weakest thing is the ombudsman opinion is never legally binding. So he has found out there is an issue, he gives a report telling that there is a issue, but there is no legal binding on that, and it is politically neutral also. The Swedish parliamentary ombudsman is appointed by the parliament and helps to maintain public confidence in the activities of the courts and the public administration. Also have an ombudsman for military affairs to ensure that statutes, regulations and rules are observed by the officers. So other ombudsmen exist in a number of special areas that I have mentioned. These are appointed by the government. They are having similar duties of surveillance, each in particular spheres, such as consumer ombudsman, equal opportunities ombudsman, the ombudsman against ethnic discrimination, the children's ombudsman, the office of the disability ombudsman. There is also a press ombudsman who, rather than being a public institution, is sponsored by the media. So the ombudsman is a body who is acting on the basis of the public complaint. He can suo motu also initiate action, or he can find out any issues are there. He can make an observation while doing some other inquiry. So based on this, if he is finding out there is some issue, he has the power to go for initiating disciplinary procedures against the official. If any misdemeanor is observed, any maladministration is there. But usually what he is doing is he will just give a recommendation telling that there is an issue. This person is not properly doing, or this system is not functioning properly. There is a higher chance of people's grievances. So, but what happens is it is just a recommendation. It's not legally binding. What happens is that will not be much effective. However, it will be giving some sort of relief to the people, and it will happen. It is not that a court is giving the verdict, but it's to an extent, it is a body which will support the government to what you call correct its actions, correct its administration. It is what you call a feeler, which is put in the society among the public to feel whether, or to get a feel, what you call, I can just feel whether my administration is going on properly among the people, whether there is any, whether my governance is being accepted by the people. So obviously that is one important thing in a democratic situation, right? Like the people who have selected the government and the governing people, the executive, the government has to know whether I am doing the governance properly, whether my people are getting their requirements, their rights met out as per the procedure, as per the law made by the legislature. So this is a feeler. I am just seeing whether what is the grievance. Public is telling this is the issue. Ombudsman is going and finding out whether the system is proper. He is giving a recommendation. The government, if he is sincere, the government is sincere, they are very much interested in the public welfare. They obviously they will consider it. It's not a mandatory thing, but they will consider it. They will see that there is some issue, there is a flaw in the system. They will take corrective actions. They will take things into like they will modify the rules, they will modify the order so that the governance is proper. So this ombudsman is not like a court. Like if still the things are continuing, obviously the complainant will go to the court and get an order which is legally binding. But before he goes to the court, this is an institution which will help the government to have a license with the people, and get correct themselves any issues are there, because obviously there will not be anything which will not be 100% correct. So what are the mistakes which I will get a feedback? So it is mostly like a feeler, or I am getting a feedback from the public about my governance. See, this is the parliamentary ombudsman, justiciar ombudsman. That is a JO. That's why I have written JO. The parliamentary ombudsman covers all central and local government agencies and bodies. It is not intended to supervise cabinet ministers or members of parliament. Anyone who feels that he or she has been wronged may submit a written complaint to the ombudsman. The parliament has empowered the ombudsman with full discretion to decide the cases to investigate. It is the ombudsman's duty to inspect from time to time authorities under their supervision. Frequent inspections have been made of central government agencies, courts, prisons, police, etc. So it is like a watchdog. He is just watching whether it is properly done. He is looking, he taking what you call inspections to different authorities. That is also there. The ombudsman also pursues long-term investigations. He is not concerned with the contents of the court's decision, but rather with the question of whether a judge has acted illegally and violated its mandate. He will be looking into that. I told you that judiciary, he will not look into the right or wrong, adjudication of the judgment, but he will see whether the judge has acted illegally. That's the only thing. One of the duties is to present an annual report to the parliament. So that report I already discussed. Then what is the ultimate effect? Sometimes it will result in an amendment of a law or ordinance. I told you this ombudsman brings out the negative things, or what are the drawbacks of a governance, or any issues with the lawmaking. Legislature has made a law, there is some issue. So obviously we will get a feedback. This is not correct. So what will happen? Amendment of a law or ordinance. The report is examined by one of the standing parliamentary committees. After examining the contents on a spot check basis, the committee presents a statement of opinion to the parliament. So this is dealing with the election and qualifications. The tenure of the ombudsman and his deputy is 4 years. They are elected by a special committee of 14 members of the parliament. There is no restriction on re-election. I have told you. He may resign or be dismissed from the office during his term by the parliament at any time. In case of vacancy in the office of ombudsman, his deputy assumes the office of ombudsman. His deputy until the parliament elects a new ombudsman along with a new deputy. So once he is resigning, the next person will take over till a new person is elected by the parliament. So there is a special procedure for election of a deputy. The parliament is not in session. So we will not go detail into that. The qualifications of the civil and military ombudsman are laid down in simple terms in the Swedish constitution, which include known legal ability, outstanding integrity. So integrity also is coming into. That is the main factor actually for ombudsmen when they are looking into the corruptions, when they are looking into the ill effects or the maladministration. Basically, this corruption or the illegal gratification, those are the main points which the ombudsman has to see. And so outstanding integrity is a must for all ombudsmen anywhere in the world. So so that's why they are taking prominent judges in Sweden, not only in Sweden, all over India, all over the world. So other ombudsman institutions like consumer ombudsman in 1971, the duty to ensure that the Marketing Act and the Unfair Contract Terms Act are followed to protect the consumer. The Swedish Children's Ombudsman watches over juvenile rights and interests. The basis of this work is the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child and to ensure that Sweden fulfills its obligations. I told you, different ombudsmen are there to look into the different issues. Consumer Ombudsman for consumer disputes. Swedish Children's Ombudsman. Here he will be looking into the rights of the child and how the Sweden has taken steps or how it is being fulfilled. The Equal Opportunities Ombudsman. See whether there is an equality of men and women at workplace. That is one thing which they are looking into. Then ethnic discrimination. There is no such discrimination on the basis of race, skin, color, national or ethnic origin or religious faith. He looks into that. The Disability Ombudsman looks into the whether there is any discrimination or the rights and interests of the the disabled persons are being taken care. Press Ombudsman is entirely voluntary and wholly financed by the 3 press organizations: the National Press Club, the Union of Journalists, and the Newspaper Publishers Association. These organizations were also responsible for drawing up Sweden's Code of Ethics for the press, television, and radio. The purpose is to establish a self-regulated system. So that is it controls the press. I will move to United Kingdom. So here the post of the Ombudsman is attached to the Westminster Parliament. So how it started in UK? See here the post of Ombudsman is attached to the Westminster. It's the Parliament is mostly it is being attached to the executive. So to see how whether I have already told you it's a hand of the Parliament only. They will find out. Even though there is an independence, there is some sort of accountability factor and all these things. So the United Kingdom also it is attached to the Parliament. The jurisdictions extending to all departments of the central government and other government institutions. The Office of the Parliamentary Commissioner for Administration was created in 1967, covering the activities of the central government departments. So there is a Parliamentary Commissioner for Administration. That was the first move in 1967, which will cover all central government departments. a separate National Health Service Ombudsman was subsequently created. But this office has to date always been held by the same person, and the two offices are usually referred to as the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman. This ombudsman will usually investigate complaints referred to him or her by a member of parliament where there has been evidence of maladministration having occurred, which has resulted in an unremedied injustice. So that is the issue. Now, initially the Parliamentary Commissioner for Administration came. He is the ombudsman who was created in 1967. Then the Health Service Ombudsman came. In Britain, even though these two posts were created separately, but that has been held by the same person, and it is usually called as the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman. And the complaint is referred by an MP, member of the Parliament, and based on that, they will investigate ombudsman. However, here there is a preliminary requirement, that is, there should be evidence of maladministration. It is not that any person, any public can go to them. It's like the MP of the member of the parliament has to give a complaint, has to refer the complaint, and then there should be an evidence of maladministration, and there should be an unremedied injustice. Any issue has happened which is not being remedied. So maladministration, unremedied injustice, these two things, if it is there, then the parliament member can refer the matter to the ombudsman for investigation. The complaints to the ombudsman are subject to a time bar. This means that the ombudsman may determine a complaint to be out of jurisdiction. Too much time has passed between the event or course of events being complained about, the complaint being received by the ombudsman. Now, the ombudsman also has a right to reject the thing, telling that it is time barred. There is a limitation. So, if it is there is a lot of time gap between the when the first issues or things have happened and then after referring to the ombudsman, so there is a time lag. So the ombudsman can reject it. Separate agencies exist to handle complaints relating to departments and agencies of devolved administration. These are the Northern Ireland Ombudsman, the Public Grievances Ombudsman for Wales, and Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. So you see, UK consists of this Wales, Ireland, and this Scotland. So these ombudsmen are looking into those areas. And the Welsh Assembly and Scottish Parliament and the Northern Ireland Assembly. These are the they are attached to these assemblies. Like the Northern Ireland, you will come into the Ireland Ombudsman is attached to the Northern Ireland Assembly. The Public Service Ombudsman for the Wales is connected to the Welsh Assembly, and the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman is connected to the Scottish Parliament. So UK has these three countries are there, and these areas will be addressed by the respective ombudsmans. The local government, formerly the Commission for Local Government Administration, there are two commissioners for England and Wales that was created in 1973, and a similar office for Scotland in 1974. So this is how the UK the ombudsman concept came. Initially, the Parliament the commissioner came, then health also was included. That was clubbed into a single person who was handling both. Then the ombudsman, you cannot approach, the public cannot approach directly. The MP has to refer the complaint to the ombudsman, where there is a preliminary evidence should be there for any injustice caused. And even the ombudsman has a what you call a right to reject a complaint, telling that there is a significant time gap between the occurrence of the event and the what you call the when the matter was referred to the ombudsman. These are the other ombudsman services, like different areas, different ombudsmen have been appointed, like the Communications and Internet Service Adjudication Scheme, Financial Ombudsman Services, the Financial Service Ombudsman Scheme for the Isle of Man, the Furniture Ombudsman Schemes, Services, Housing Ombudsman, Judicial Appointments and Conduct Ombudsman, then the Legal Ombudsman, Motor Ombudsman, Northern Ireland Public Service Ombudsman. I've just listed out the different ombudsmen. Here also, the basic concept is that whether there is a maladministration, whether the people it's for redressal of the grievances of the people in different areas. So these different ombudsmen have been created. Now we'll go to ombudsman in India. See here, the basic things are it is into three parts. You can see one is the Lokpal, then the Lokayukta, then the other ombudsman systems in India. The Lokpal, if you see, Lokpal or People's Friend is an anti-corruption authority or body of ombudsman who represents the public interest in the Republic of India. So here in India, you know, ombudsman, this Lokpal concept was going on for so many years. People were not ready to, the governments were not ready to come with a, what you call an independent or an, what you call a powerful authority who can look into the maladministration of the government. So there were a lot of fight. There were a lot of fight for getting into this, getting this bill passed, Lokpal bill. But finally it was passed. And Anna Hazare was the person who was initially behind this. He was the person who has led that movement and all those things. So which led to the ultimately the government passing the Lokpal. So it is an anti-corruption authority because in India, you see, we are all aware that in different departments, different authorities, different governments, corruption prevails. And it is a true fact. It is not that nobody is aware of that and it is something which we have to go and find out. It is actually available in the society. If you go to a government office or any institution or any public administration, you cannot rule out that there is a corruption. It is there. So in such a case, the people of India who were aggrieved by the situation has to approach some authority for grievance. So now the Lokpal is a body which deals with the anti-corruption. It is a type of ombudsman where the corruption is being investigated and they can take action. The current chairperson of the Lokpal is Pinaki Chandra Bose. He is the retired Supreme Court Justice. The Lokpal has jurisdiction over central government to inquire into allegations of corruption against its public functionaries and for matters connected to corruption. Basically corruption. So corruption is there in every level, from the down level to the top level. So what are the allegations? How it is being dealt with? So the Lokpal is given the jurisdiction to look into all those things. The Lokpal and Lokayukta Act was passed in 2013 with amendments in Parliament following the Jan Lokpal movement led by Anna Hazare in 2011. Initially it came with actually it was a toothless act, then there was a lot of agitation and then it was amended. The Lokpal is responsible for inquiring into corruption charges at the national level, while the Lokayukta performs the same function at the state level. If you see, we have a union central government and the state government. Central government, Lokpal is taking care and the Lokayukta is taking care of the state government level. The age of the Lokpal on the date of assuming office as the chairperson or member should not be less than 45 years. So above 45 years is the chairperson's entry age. The term, how it came, this concept of Lokpal. You see, the term Lokpal was coined by Dr. L.M. Singhvi in 1963. So see, 1963 to 2013, around 50 years it took to make it a success or make it a reality. The concept of constitutional ombudsman was first proposed in Parliament by Law Minister Ashok Kumar Sen in early 60s. The first Lokpal bill was proposed by Advocate Shanti Bhushan in 1968 and passed in the 4th Lok Sabha in 1969, but did not pass through the Rajya Sabha subsequently. Lokpal bills were introduced in 71, 77, 85 again by Ashok Kumar Sen while serving as Law Minister in the Rajiv Gandhi government, and again in 89, 96, 98, 2001, 2005 and 2008. Yet they were never passed. 45 years after its first introduction and after 10 failed attempts, the Lokpal bill was finally enacted. So you see how it was like a continuous fight to get the body, get the legislation, to establish the body, but it took 10 failed attempts and around 50 years to get the Lokpal. The Lokpal bill provides for the filing with the ombudsman of complaints of corruption against the Prime Minister, other ministers and MPs. So that was the main thing, like all ministers, Prime Minister, MPs, all were coming under the purview of the Lokpal. The first Administrative Reforms Commission recommended the enacting of the office of Lokpal, convinced that such an institution was justified not only for removing the sense of injustice from the minds of citizens, but also to instill public confidence in the efficiency of administrative machinery. So why this is required? Because usually if you see, still the people of India are not convinced about the they are not, see, the education level in different states are different. So depending on that, how the government is being selected, who is the ruling body, all things will change. So people are getting what you call unjustly they are being taken advantage of, and there is lot of corruption and maladministration prevalent in different areas, so that I have an injustice, a sense of injustice, that even though I have a government, I'm not getting my rights. That depends, that varies from state to state. Like if it is a literacy level is very low, there the person may not be aware of his right also, but still he will be living in poverty. He will be denied of all his requirements. So that sense of injustice which I have in my mind, that has to be removed. Then public confidence should be there. Administrative machinery, if police is there to take care of the life and property of the people, I should have a confidence that if I go to the police station, I should get the justice. If my property should be protected, my life should be protected. So that public confidence is required. So the Administrative Reforms Commission, when they were recommending for the Lokpal office, the two things what they were telling is, one is I should have I should instill a public confidence. Administrative machinery is functioning well. I should instill that. The second thing is to remove the sense of injustice from the minds of citizens. So these were the two basic concepts. Based on this, the Lokpal concept has come out. See, as of March 2019, and ever since the related Act of Parliament was passed in India, retired Supreme Court Judge Pinaki Chandra Ghosh is appointed as the first Lokpal of India by a committee consisting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chief Justice of India Ranjan Gogoi and Lok Sabha Speaker Sumitra Mahajan on 23 March 2019, whereas the members were appointed with effect from 27 March 2019. It consists of a chairperson and 8 members, half of whom are judicial members or have been a judge of the Supreme Court or Chief Justice of a High Court, and the other half being non-judicial members are people of impeccable integrity. Integrity is another word again it is coming up, and outstanding ability, having special knowledge and expertise of no less than 25 years in matters relating to anti-corruption policy, public administration, vigilance, finance, including insurance, banking, law, and management. So 8 members. It consists of a chairperson and 8 members. So total 9 members. Chairperson plus 8 members, out of which half will be judicial members, who will be retired justice or judges. Need not be retired also, sitting also. Then the non-judicial members also should be there, but they have to have impeccable integrity and they should have knowledge of the public administration, anti-corruption policy, all those things. How the Lokpal is being empowered. Section 25 of the Lokpal Act deals with the powers of the Lokpal. The provision states that once the Lokpal receives a complaint governing under the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, it can initiate the investigation. If the complaint is found to be true in the investigation, he can ask the government to take disciplinary action against the concerned public servant or file a case in the special court. So if I am aggrieved, telling that this person has he has got a wealth or asset which is not proportionate to the post which he is holding. That is a public, like as per the Lokpal and Lokayukt Act, all the public servants are required to disclose the assets and liabilities every year. So that is there. So if the Lokpal, I am getting a complaint against I am a Lokpal and I am getting a complaint that this person is holding a post in this administration as a a district administration, he is holding a post and he is having wealth which is not proportionate to the income which is. His salary may be only 5 lakhs, maximum 2 lakhs or 5 lakhs, but he is having a very large asset. Now, such a case, he can go under the Prevention of Corruption Act and he can see that investigation is done and what is the source of income, and he can obviously give a a recommendation to the government to remove him or to start disciplinary action and remove him, because as public servants cannot be removed without any domestic inquiry or disciplinary proceedings as per the procedures. So that has to be done. So disciplinary action has to be taken and appropriate punishment has to be imposed. So that is one power, that is section 25 of the Lokpal Act deals with that. The Lokpal has jurisdiction to inquire into allegations of corruption against anyone who is or has been a prime minister. That is the most power. Prime minister is having the power, or a minister of the government, or a member of parliament, as well as the officials of the union government under the group A, B, C, and D. So different levels of government officials also is coming under the Lokpal jurisdiction. Now, the chairperson, members, officers, and directors of any board, corporation, society, trust, or autonomous body, either established by an act of parliament or wholly or partly funded by the union or state government, they are also covered under the Lokpal. It also covers any society or trust or body that receives foreign contribution about 10 lakh. So, any foreign contribution is received by a trust, 10 lakhs and above. They are also coming under the jurisdiction of Lokpal. What are the exceptions? The Lokpal, however, cannot inquire into any corruption charge against the Prime Minister. The allegations are related to international relations, external and internal security, and public order, unless a full bench of the Lokpal, consisting of its chair and all members, considers the initiation of a probe and at least 2/3 of the members approve it. Such a hearing should be held in camera, and if the complaint is dismissed, the record shall not be published or made available to anyone. So, this, like, if you see the other ombudsman, this is the Lokpal is also having power to look into the allegations against the Prime Minister also. But however, the exception is when it is connecting to the international relations, or there is any security related issues, or it is relating to the public order. So three things: international relations, external or internal security, or public order. The allegations or any corruption charge against the Prime Minister has to be referred to the full bench of Lokpal, and if the they can probe into the issue if 2/3 of the members are approving the thing, like 8 + 1, 9 people are there in the Lokpal, they are looking into it, and 2/3 of the members are approving that there is some issue, you have to go for a probe investigation, then it can be done. If it is, but such a decision is taken in camera, they will not be, it will be highly confidential, it will not be divulged to anybody. And if the complaint is dismissed, the records shall be purged, it will be removed from the system itself. So a complaint, how it is being done, how a complaint can be given. A complaint under the Lokpal Act should be in the prescribed form and must pertain to an offence under the Prevention of Corruption Act against a public servant. So basic act or statute which the Lokpal is looking into is the Prevention of Corruption Act. So Prevention of Corruption Act deals with the public servant. So public servant is doing a corruption, he is taking undue gratification, he is taking any undue advantage of his position. Like, I need not take money itself, I can take some benefits of my position. Like, I am a police officer, I can take benefit of my position by using my power and getting some things in kind also, not in cash, but in kind also. So these are all undue advantages. I am aggregating assets which are not proportionate to my income. So these are the things which will come under the Prevention of Corruption Act, and or any fraud committed by a public servant. So these things these things will be coming under the Prevention of Corruption Act. And even if the Prime Minister is doing, or any other official in cabinet, what do you call the group A, B, C, D officers of central government, any trust bodies. So whatever I have discussed, those people, whoever is committing any crimes or any offences under this act, this Prevention of Corruption Act, there is an allegation that there is a commission of such an offence. So that complaint can be given to the Lokpal, and there is no restriction on who can make such a complaint. There is no restriction that only a citizen of India can do a complaint. Anybody can do that. You have seen in Sweden also the similar situation was there, that the complaint can be given by any person other than the citizen also. When a complaint is received, the Lokpal may order a preliminary inquiry by its inquiring or refer it for investigation by any agency, including the CBI, if there is a prima facie case. So I am receiving a complaint telling that in this institution this is happening. So what I will do is, first I will do a preliminary inquiry. I have an inquiry wing, or I will refer it to the CBI. This is Central Bureau of Investigation. I will send it to them, ask them to do an investigation inquiry and give us a report to see whether there is a prima facie, whether there is a case. So before ordering the investigation by the agency, the Lokpal shall call for an explanation of the public servant to determine whether a prima facie case exists. This provision, the Act says, will not interfere with any search and seizure that may be undertaken by the investigating agency. So the principles of natural justice is also met. Like, I am giving a letter to the public servant also that there is a complaint. You give your explanation why this issue is there, why I should not proceed with that. So once that explanation comes, that also will be looked into by the Lokpal. The Act says it will not interfere into the search and seizure that may be undertaken by the investigation. So investigation agency will go and search and they will do the inquiry and they will give the report. So the Lokpal, with respect to central government servants, may refer the complaints to the Central Vigilance Commission. The CVC will send a report to the Lokpal regarding officials falling under Group A and B and proceed as per the CVC Act against those in Group C and D. So in the Lokpal, when they are receiving any complaint against the central government servants, they will refer it to the Central Vigilance Commission. The CVC will send a report to the Lokpal and they will give a report. Based on that, they will proceed. The inquiry wing or any other agency will have to complete this preliminary inquiry and submit a report to the Lokpal within 60 days. So 2 months time is given. It has to seek comments from both the public servant and the competent authority before submitting its report. So here, see, there is a 60 days time limit given. And what they have to do, they have to seek from 2 persons. Public servant also you have to take, and the competent authority. Who is the competent authority? Competent authority for each category of public servant. Like Prime Minister, it is the Lok Sabha, and for other ministers, it will be the Prime Minister, and for the department officials, it will be the Minister concerned. Like that, if I am getting a complaint against the Prime Minister, I have to take comments from the Prime Minister also and from the Lok Sabha also. So this is how it works. A Lokpal bench consisting of no less than 3 members shall consider the preliminary inquiry report, and after giving an opportunity to the public servant accused of corruption for his or her defense, decide whether it should proceed with the investigation. So I should see whether a prima facie case is there. I have given the opportunity to the public servant. I have heard him. So after hearing, I can take a decision whether to continue with the investigation. So an inquiry has been conducted initially, and now they will go for a detailed investigation. It can order a full investigation or initiate departmental proceedings or close the proceedings. So these are the 3 things. So Lokpal, first complaint is received. They have to refer it to the public servant. They have to serve it to the. They have to give it to the the authority, inquiry authority, CBI or CVC or their individual inquiry authority. Get the prima facie report. The report has to be sent to the public servant also has to give their views on that. Then the competent authority, as per the grade of the public servant, they also have to give their views. And once the report comes, and after hearing the public servant also, then they can take a decision whether to go ahead with the detailed investigation. So inquiry is conducted, prima facie there is a case, they will go for investigation. If it is not proved, there is no prima facie case, they can go close the proceedings. Or if there is any lapse, any procedural lapse, or any other not that much aggravated thing, they can refer it to the departmental proceedings. It can also proceed against the complainant if the allegation is false. Now, there are a lot of complainants who are politically motivated. They will give some corruption. So to avoid that frivolous complaints, false and frivolous complaints, what they are given an option is that if you are giving a false and frivolous complaint, you can take action against the complainant also. So there is a threat. So there is no such to mitigate or to weed out such baseless allegations. This clause is also there. The preliminary inquiry should normally be completed within 90 days of the receipt of the complaint. So that is one thing. Now, after investigation, the agency ordered to conduct the probe has to file its investigation report. Now the investigation report will come. The copy of the report has to be filed before the Lokpal. A bench of at least 3 members will consider the report and make it grant sanction to the prosecution wing to proceed against public servant based on the agency's charge sheet. Now, always the quorum is three members. So investigation is done. The report is coming to the Lokpal. Then the Lokpal will see the quorum of 3 members. They will see whether to proceed and sanction to the prosecution to proceed against the public servant based on the agency's charge sheet. So they will proceed against the the public servant based on the charge sheet of the agency. We also ask the competent authority to take departmental action or direct the closure of the report. So they can do, one is the prosecution, that is a criminal proceedings, and second is the departmental proceedings also. Simultaneously they can do. Or they can also close the report also after seeing this. Previously, the authority vested with the power to appoint or dismiss a public servant was the one to grant sanction under Section 197 of the CRPC and Section 19 of the Prevention of Corruption Act. So that was the earlier power. Now this power has been given to the Lokpal. In any case, the Lokpal will have to seek the comments of the competent authority as well as the public servant's comments before granting such sanction. So this is the 2 things. So to sanction the prosecution has to continue. Then the Lokpal has to seek the comments of the competent authority. One second. Yeah, look, shall I call you back? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll continue. So what I was telling was this Lokpal, when they are getting the investigation report. So once they are getting the investigation report, they can just look into that and then they can give the sanction for prosecution. They can also simultaneously give the power to the departmental action or to close the report. So that is their main powers. Only thing is the competent authority has to give the sanction. Their comments have to be sought before giving any such sanction for prosecution. The Lokpal also has a secretary who will be appointed by the Lokpal chairperson from a panel of names where the union government. The secretary will be the rank of the secretary to the government of India. The Lokpal will have to appoint an inquiry wing headed by a director of inquiry and a prosecution wing headed by a director of prosecution. I told you when a complaint comes, the Lokpal can give it to the inquiry wing. Their own inquiry wing is there, which is the director of inquiry, prosecution wing headed by director of prosecution. So these people are there. Until these officers are appointed, the government will have to make available officers and staff from its ministries and departments to conduct preliminary inquiries and pursue the prosecution. The institution will also have to appoint other officers and staff. Now I'll go to Lokayukta. Lokayukta also is somewhat similar to the powers of the Lokpal, but here actually this slide actually I have mentioned as Lokayukta. It is Lokpal only. So disclosure of assets, I have already told you that Lokpal, the public servants have to declare their assets and liabilities in a prescribed form. So here you have to read it as Lokpal only. Lokayukta will come. So Lokayukta, it is an anti-corruption ombudsman organization in the Indian states. So once appointed, Lokayukta cannot be dismissed or not transferred by the government and can only be removed by passing an impeachment motion by the state assembly. So how it came out, initially in Haryana, there was a public interest in litigation by Naresh Kadian, and before the High Court and Contempt Court order petition for not appointing Lokayukta in Haryana, the Administrative Reforms Commission headed by Morarji Desai submitted a special interim report on problems of redressal of grievances in 1966. So these are the factors which came into the what you call this concept of Lokayukta. In this report, the ARC recommended the setting up of two special authorities, that is Lokpal and Lokayukta, for the redressal of grievances, citizens' grievances. Lokayukta investigates case of corruption where substantiated recommend action. So any corruption is there, if there is any substantiated proof, they will go for action. So there also, this is almost similar only. The Lokayukta, along with the Income Tax Department and the Anti-Corruption Bureau, mainly help people publicize corruption among the politicians and government officials. Many acts of the Lokayukta have resulted in criminal or other consequences for those charged. Now you see, Lokayuktas have been posted in different states. In different states, it is there. And it varies from state to state, the power. Like in Maharashtra, it is a very weak institution where the powers, staff, funds are all very less. And if you see Karnataka Lokayukta is very much empowered. They have the like power to investigate, inquire, and take action also. In Kerala also, the Lokayukta is not that powerful. Like they can give advisories, they can give pass orders, which will not have any binding effect, but still they are being considered. Has been constituted for investigating into the allegations of corruption and maladministration against the public servants and for speedy redressal of grievances of the public. That is in Kerala. The Act also provides that all public servants are required to submit their statements of assets and liabilities besides the statements in respect of those members of the family once in 2 years before they commit authority in the form of prescribed by the rules. President Lokayukta of Kerala is Justice Siriak Joseph. Just I will take you through some ombudsman institutions in India, like the banking ombudsman. Banking ombudsman scheme is developed by, it has been instituted by RBI, who is a regulator in this field. So here it is a quasi-judicial power where the customers can use this mechanism in addition to their other grievance redressal machinery. There is no bar for the customers from approaching other consumer redressal forums. The banking ombudsman scheme initially came in 1995 and got amended subsequently in different phases, last in 2017. Here the complaint can be made to the banking ombudsman on different grounds, namely non-payment, delay in payment of checks, non-adherence to bank working hours, refusal to open accounts, etc. So if I am going to a bank and the payment is delayed, or the bankers are leaving early, or there is a refusal on the part of the staff to open the account, I can, if I am eligible, I can go to the ombudsman and file a complaint. But what the requirement is, first they have to give a complaint to the bank. Bank has to give a reply within 30 days. And if they are rejecting the complaint, or if they are not replying, then they can approach the banking ombudsman. And any complaint, any reply, any order of the banking ombudsman, first they will be asking, giving you an advisory, telling that this is what you have done is wrong. What the bank has done is wrong. You have to compensate. If they are not doing that, again the order will be passed. The banking ombudsman order can be challenged before the deputy director of the RBI. The other ombudsmans are insurance ombudsman. That is regarding the insurance issues. Here, the authority who has established it is the IRDA, or the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. Here, there is any issue regarding the repudiation of claims, or any dispute regarding the claims, or any policy issues are there. So you can approach the insurance ombudsman. You have the income tax ombudsman, which is announced by the central government in 2006. Any issues regarding the income tax, like any refund is not given. Here, it is the IT Ombudsman is appointed by the central government on the recommendation of a committee which constitutes Secretary, Department of Revenue, Chairman, CBDT, etc. So here also, you have any issues, you can approach the IT Ombudsman. However, before that, it is better first you approach the Income Tax Department. Electricity Ombudsman is actually any issue regarding the electricity distribution company. So, any issues in the electricity distribution company, any grievances are there. The Electricity Act 2003 has made a provision for the Ombudsman. So here the regulatory State Electricity Regulatory Commission, they will be nominating a person, and any grievances they can go to the Ombudsman. So in India also, if you see the Lokpal, the Lokayukta, and different areas, this Ombudsman concept is being formed. If you see in different countries, the pattern is the same. The what do you call the modus is the same. What they are dealing with is maladministration, or what do you call this corruption, or injustice to the public. So basic concept of Ombudsman is the same all over the world. This is a mechanism which the government or the in a democratic setup, the government has kept to see whether the rules and regulations are properly being done, whether the public is getting justified in their giving their services, where the public administration is properly managing the system, whether the acts and rules are being followed. And it is a method of correcting. See, most of the countries, the Ombudsman is not fully empowered. They cannot give any direction. They cannot take any action. However, they can give a report telling that these are the issues. In worst cases, they can give a recommendation for disciplinary proceedings. However, the concept, what is the use is, it is a liaison between the public and the public administration, and it is a bridging the gap. I am taking a feedback. I am rating the government. If the Ombudsman complaints are more, the government rating is less. It is just like that. So now the Ombudsman, you cannot say that it is fully empowered. However, the Ombudsman has is getting the feedback from the public regarding the governance. So the government can always correct themselves. They can always rectify. They can always amend the laws. They can always amend the systems and procedures to ensure that the governance is proper and the public grievances are being mitigated or being redressed. So an Ombudsman, in the concluding part I have mentioned here, you see, it is an intermediary between the organization and some internal or external constituency, and represents mostly the broad scope of constituent interest. What is the interest of the public? That is the main concept of the Ombudsman. Ombudsman is an official, usually appointed by the government or the parliament, who is charged with representing the interest of the public by investigating and addressing the complaints reported by individual citizens. If you don't have an Ombudsman, the people will be cut off. Now arbitrariness will come. There will be a lot of what you call the governing body, the executive will not be knowing what is happening in the field level. In some jurisdictions, an Ombudsman charged with the handling of concerns with the national government is more formally referred to as the Parliamentary Commissioner. UK, it is called the Parliamentary Commissioner. In many countries where the Ombudsman's remit extends beyond dealing with the alleged maladministration to promote and protect human rights, the Ombudsman is recognized as the National Human Rights Institution. So when they are handling the human rights issue, it's called the Human Rights Institution. The Government of India has designated several Ombudsmen for the redressal of grievances in banking, insurance, etc. The Ombudsman in India is sometimes referred to as the Chief Vigilance Officer or CVO. You cannot tell that CVO is also appointed by the government. CVC is also appointed by the government. And these institutions are also handling the corruption. So that is why we are referring them as Ombudsman. It's also a concept. The CVO, CVC, all these offices are also coming under the concept of Ombudsman. You cannot tell that CVO is an Ombudsman, CVC is an Ombudsman. They are also coming under the concept of Ombudsman. See, Lokpal or Lokayukta, that's also coming under the concept of Ombudsman. Judiciary is not covered under the Lokpal. Maharashtra is the first state to establish Lokpal, and Odisha was the first state to present a bill on the establishment of the Lokpal. The Lokayukta is not uniform across all the states. Some states have Upa-Lokayuktas and Lokayukta. In some states, the Lokayukta does not have suo motu power of investigation. Kerala state has an ombudsman for local self-government institutions like panchayats, municipalities, and corporations. He or she can inquire or investigate into allegations of actions, inactions, corruption, and maladministration. A retired judge of the High Court is appointed by the governor for a term of 3 years under the Kerala Panchayat Raj Act. The administrative wing of a democratic country has a major role to play in smooth administration, both at central and state level. The administrative authorities in democratic countries are manifested with vast discretionary powers for proper administration in the country. So I am telling you, these are all just whatever the concept I have told, this is what is written here. So basically, the Lokpal, Lokayukta, they're all handling this grievance of the any injustice or illegal gratification or any such issues with the public administration. They are handling, and it is a sort of an institution which falls under the concept of ombudsman. So basically, as I have told you, started with Sweden, then UK and India. You see all those places, the concept is the same. The way they are interpreting may be different. However, the basic core concepts are the same. It is a fight against the corruption, maladministration, and it's you have a different system or procedures being adopted. However, the intention is the same. So such cases, when you have a complaint, inquire into the system, take a report and take an action or corrective measure, it helps the government to properly give a governance. So the concept of ombudsman mainly revolves on that area only, and that is the purpose of this institution as a whole. Now my presentation is over. Anybody has any doubts or anything, you can ask.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. It was such a wonderful session, sir.
Thank you.
If ആർക്കെങ്കിലും എന്തെങ്കിലും ഡൗട്ട്സ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചോദിക്കാം.
ചെറിയൊരു സംശയമുണ്ട്. സ്വീഡനിലെ കാര്യം പറയുമ്പം അവിടുത്തെ ഈ ഓംബുഡ്സ്മാൻ എന്നുള്ള അവസ്ഥ വരുമ്പോഴേ അതൊരു സുപ്രീം അതോറിറ്റി ആയിട്ട് മാറില്ലേ? കാരണം എല്ലാത്തിലും സെപ്പറേഷൻ ഓഫ് പവറിന് പോലും യാതൊരു വാല്യൂ ഇല്ലാതെ അതൊരു സുപ്രീം അതോറിറ്റി ആയിട്ട് ഈ ഓംബുഡ്സ്മാൻ മാറില്ല.
അല്ല, സ്വീഡന്റെ പവർ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞപ്പോഴ് I have told that what they are doing is they are, see, I have an objection against the parliament. അതിന്റെ ഒരു കംപ്ലൈന്റ് വരുമ്പോൾ I am inquiring into that complaint, അല്ലേ? I am inquiring into the complaint and I am giving a report telling that this has happened. So it will not overrule or it will not what you call ഒരു സൂപ്പർ പവർ എന്നുള്ള ഒരു കൺസെപ്റ്റ് വരില്ല. It is always under the legislation. That is why it is always an officer of the parliament. എപ്പോഴും ഇതൊരു പാർലമെന്ററി ജസ്റ്റീഷ്യ ഓംബുഡ്സ്മാൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഇറ്റ്സ് എ പാർലമെന്ററി what you call, it is attached to the parliament. അപ്പോൾ പാർലമെന്റിന് അത് ബൈൻഡിങ് ആവണം. they can always reject it also. However, ഇതിനെ ഒരു ബോണഫൈഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സിസ്റ്റമായിട്ട് എടുക്കുകയാണ്. when I am using this system for bettering my governance, always I am taking advantage of it, അല്ലേ? ഇപ്പോ I am doing an arbitrary governance. I need not keep an ombudsman. If I don't want to get the feedback of the people. I know this is what is happening and I don't want to get any feedback. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെയുള്ള സിസ്റ്റത്തില് ഒരു ഡിക്റ്റേറ്റർഷിപ്പോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു കിങ്സ് റൂളിലോ ഒക്കെ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു സിസ്റ്റം ഇല്ലാന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് നോട്ട് റിക്വയർഡ്. ഹൗവർ ഇവിടെ ദിസ് ഈസ് ഫോർ ബെറ്റർമെന്റ്. ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് എൻ ഇന്റർമീഡിയറി. പാർലമെന്റിന് ഡയറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് പീപ്പിളുമായിട്ട് കണക്ട് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു സാഹചര്യം ഇല്ലാത്തപ്പോൾ ദേ ആർ കീപ്പിംഗ് ആൻ ഇന്റർമീഡിയറി. ഇതൊരു ബേസിക് കൺസെപ്റ്റ് ആണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ ഈവൻ ഇഫ് യു ഫോർഗെറ്റ് അബൌട്ട് ഓംബുഡ്സ്മാൻ, ഞാൻ വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്ന ബാങ്കിന്റെ ഇഷ്യൂ ആണെങ്കിൽ യു ഹാവ് എ സിസ്റ്റം ഓഫ് ഗ്രീവൻസ് റിട്രസൽ. ഇപ്പോൾ കംപ്ലൈൻസ് വരുന്നു, ആ കംപ്ലൈൻസ് നോക്കിയിട്ട് വി ആർ ഇൻവെസ്റ്റിഗേറ്റിംഗ് ഇൻ ടു ഇറ്റ്, എൻക്വയറിംഗ് ഇൻ ടു ദ, ഇപ്പോൾ ഒരു ബ്രാഞ്ചിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് കംപ്ലൈന്റ് ഹെഡ് ഓഫീസ് വരികയാണെങ്കിൽ വി ആർ ലുക്കിംഗ് ഇൻ ടു ദ complaint. We are asking the branch what has happened here. They will give their reply. Based on that, we will be looking into it. ഇവിടെ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഇഷ്യൂ ഉണ്ട്, നമ്മുടെ പ്രോസസ്സിന് എന്തെങ്കിലും ഇഷ്യൂ ഉണ്ട്, നമ്മുടെ പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സിന് എന്തെങ്കിലും പ്രോബ്ലം ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ we can first look in. If you see banking ombudsman ആദ്യം പറയുന്നത് you have to approach the bank first. ആ ബാങ്കിൽ വന്നിട്ട് ആ ബാങ്കിൽ നിന്ന് റിട്രസൽ 1 മാസത്തിനകം കിട്ടിയില്ലെങ്കിലാണ് you are supposed to go to the banking ombudsman. അപ്പൊ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഇവിടെയും ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ ഇപ്പൊ ഒരു കംപ്ലൈന്റ് കിട്ടുകയാണെങ്കിൽ I will look into the system. അപ്പൊ എന്റെ ഇന്റൻഷൻ എന്താണ്? I have to see that this will not happen again. this is affecting my business, this is affecting my goodwill. Industry goodwill affect. So what I will do is I will take a corrective action. I will redress the grievance at that instance. If he is not satisfied, then he can go to the ombudsman. And ombudsman also will see whether the bank has been properly to redress the grievance. Likewise, in parliament also, when a complaint, public is giving a complaint, he will look into that. You will see whether, I have made this law or this procedure to see the welfare of the people. However, the persons are not happy. What is the issue? So this എല്ലാ ആംഗിളും ചിലപ്പോൾ നോക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ടാവില്ല. അപ്പൊ ആ ആംഗിൾ ആയിരിക്കും ഈ കംപ്ലൈന്റ് വഴി എനിക്ക് കിട്ടുന്നത്. Based on that, I am looking into it, and I am not. Otherwise, the ombudsman cannot direct that the person or this person have to resign. He should be thrown to the jail. Nothing like that. But it is a feedback. That's what I told. These are all feelers. എനിക്ക് ആ ഫീല് കിട്ടുകയാണ് പബ്ലിക്കിന്റെ എന്റെ ഗവേണൻസ് എങ്ങനെ പോകുന്നു, എവിടെയാണ് എന്റെ മിസ്റ്റേക്ക്. അപ്പോൾ ആ മിസ്റ്റേക്ക് ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയിട്ട് ഐ ക്യാൻ റെക്ടിഫൈ ദാറ്റ്. സോ ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് വൈ യു ഹാവ് ടു ടേക്ക് ഇറ്റ് ആസ് എ വാട്ട് യു കോൾ എ സപ്ലിമെന്ററി ഫാക്ട് ഫോർ പ്രോപ്പർ public administration. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other question? Sir, I think no, sir.
Okay.
So shall we wind up?
Yeah. Sorry, I have taken a little bit more time, I think. Other than
It's okay, sir. It's okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank
you. Thank you.